Great. So thank you so much. And we're basically going to speaking about the disaggregated telco, whether this is desirable or inevitable. We're going to do some really quick intros quickly. Francesca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Francesca, Head of Infrastructure and Energy at Vodafone UK.
And Nastasi?
Hi, Yesmean. It's great to be back here with you and Francesca. We just had a bit of an introduction to Rakuten in the last slide. My thanks to Ari. Rakuten Symphony is a software company, so we provide Open RAN, automation, and cloud software. We have over 400,000 radiating elements that are deployed across the UK, Japan, Germany, Canada, and other countries. It's great to be here.
Great. So this session, quite a big topic, quite a big concept. We've heard a lot of different things across the sessions today in terms of what disaggregation means, how it relates to a number of different concepts. But maybe let's start with Francesca. How would you define disaggregation, and also how does it fit into sort of what Vodafone is looking to do?
Yes, it's a very broad, let's say, concept, but let's start with the simple one. Obviously, disaggregation is on a vertical level. It's disaggregating hardware from software, and that enables us to be, more innovative and innovate with the pace of software. And it also enables us to be more service-driven because we can provision network resources and network function on demand. But it also means disaggregating the function itself. If we think on the ORAN stack, which is we're moving from fully monolithic stack to a disaggregated one, and also the 5G standalone, it's fully modular architecture. And what implies is that we're going to go towards flexible topology distributed architecture, which in turn means that we can have a single infrastructure that can enable, services with very dynamic and different SLA. It also means, for me, if we go a little bit beyond, it means, disaggregating or containerization and disaggregating in a function, a capability into microservices, which helps with few things. One is to react faster to market change and market demand, but also, and more importantly, to de-risk transformation program, because we are able to really add incremental capability as we go along and we move from a present mode of operation to a future mode of operation.
And we're going to dig into that a little bit more, but Nastasi, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think if we talk about disaggregation, and we're meaning the separating of processes, services, whether it's across the technology or whether it's the business, the organization, what does this mean for us? If it means, like we said, it can be more agile, deliver services to the consumers faster as they want to take them, move away from this sort of hardware-based, closed networks to open cloud, virtualized networks that are softwareized. It gives us the agility to react faster to these market conditions. So, I would say that disaggregation in that term is both desirable and inevitable for us as an industry.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back to a point that you made, Francesca, about, as we mentioned, and Nastasi, you touched on this too, it's not just about sort of that underlying technology, right? It's that shift in mindset and the way that you operate. And just a question, what are some of the pitfalls in sort of seeing disaggregation as, buying a disaggregated stack versus actually changing that mode of operation, as you mentioned?
For us, it's the latter one. It's fully underlie our business strategy to become a digital service provider. And that because to become a digital service provider, disaggregation, openness, and distribution and virtualization are all key. And we need to adopt this approach holistically from an infrastructure perspective, the connectivity layer, the services, and the business layer. So if we start from the infrastructure, for example, that has to be fully disaggregated and fully distributed because we're going towards, distributed architecture. So having an edge-centric infrastructure is going to be key. On the connectivity, we are virtualizing connectivity services as well as network services, respectively, through SDN and NAV. And obviously, once we virtualize, then we can automate and cloudify, enabling new digital experience, and then through an API approach, that's what enables us to really go beyond connectivity, because then we can really deliver the network as a platform and bundled, for example, with security to deliver security and connectivity hand to hand. And this is key because application, if you look at the enterprise, are moving business critical workload to the cloud. Users are fully distributed. So security platform and network as a platform, it's a right bundle. Or, for example, we can bundle, unify communication as a services with connectivity. Again, we're going beyond connectivity, but then if we want to go farther up, then we can to become a fully digital service provider. This is where we need to really work with cloud providers, system integrators, SaaS providers, ISV, to really bring together through, synergy at all level, the entire stack. And then, of course, there is the question of still service assurance for the end-to-end, the digital services. But just to mention, yes, for us, disaggregation is a key principle that is adopted across all the layers for us to become a telco player and to go beyond connectivity.
And as you mentioned as well, it's sort of this moving to this model where you are serving not just very vanilla offerings to your customers, but moving to more of that pick and mix and letting them choose based on their requirements, right? And I guess a point to that, to what extent do you see, I know obviously a lot of operators are still on this journey. It's not something that you complete within a year or two or so. Have you seen any outcomes so far in terms of being able to serve customer needs in a different way than you could before?
We're seeing from an innovation perspective, because we have integrated our connectivity with distributed cloud platform, AWS and Azure, both through network edge and on-prem edge, depending on the use case. But I think where we are right now is enabling new value prop through co-creation, co-innovating with customer, with a broader partner ecosystem, and using our Edge Innovation Lab as an incubation platform to really prove the value prop, not of the technology itself, but in terms of how we can help our customers to address their current operational and business challenge, and how we can introduce real-time capability really in their operation. So I think we are seeing some outcome, but we're still on to the driving incubation and innovation.
Yeah. And Nastasi, actually, from the partner perspective as well, what are some of the biggest sort of challenges that you see telcos facing?
So I think as an industry, we've traditionally built our networks on hardware-based closed networks since the early 80s, and with every generational change, it's meant we've had to change cabinets, cards, and sites. Moving towards sort of a cloud-based network would mean that we could be much more agile in terms of those upgrading of the network as we go through future generational changes. And again, it would mean that we could just deploy these services much faster to the consumer, which is what they really want. We look at companies like Netflix or other hyperscalers. They would typically issue over 100 different software updates a day. Most network operators, will struggle to get a software change within 6 months within their network because of how they've been typically built on this architecture, on proprietary architecture. So we heard earlier today about some of the value and driving value within the telecoms and communications industry. If we look at the hyperscalers and how they typically are more agile, this is, I think, a good lesson for us as to why we would see the benefits moving towards cloud-based and virtualized networks as the industry evolves.
Yeah, and going back to that concept, I know it was touched upon in one of the earlier panels as well, this concept of, I call it hyperscale economics, right? Being able to separate the way that, your cost base and your revenues grow or change in relation to one another. And how critical is disaggregation to this? Is it, a nice to have to be able to unlock this, or is this a 100% must have?
I think it's 100% must have for us. If we want to achieve scale, it's really important that, we have a disaggregated architecture across all the domain. If we want to achieve efficiency, so and reduce cost, again, once we disaggregate and we use a software approach and virtualization, cloudification, then we can really introduce automation, which in turn introduce a lot of efficiency. And we are introducing, automation, again, the opportunity space is big. It's not just automation of the FCAPs, of the configuration, the fault management, and the performance management and security management, but it's automation in all the business process and business function as well, on the way we monitor energy, we measure, and we optimize energy, on the way we run budget. So really the opportunity space is there, but I think when it comes to network, only if we disaggregate, we virtualize, we automate, and we cloudify, that we can then reach those cost efficiency. And once we have done that, then obviously I think disaggregation is also an enablement of sustainable growth, because it's an enabler of service innovation. Only through, once we have cloudified and automate, through API, as I mentioned, we can enable really the art of possible, whether it's a platform play, whether it's a security play, whether it's a solution play.
And how far are we from that today? Because I think we've mentioned across a few sessions now this idea of the network becoming more programmable, more instructable, as you mentioned, through sort of an API-first strategy. But Nastasi, how far do you see the industry being away from that today?
Yeah. I think it's like you said, it's a long journey, but I think we're there. I think the other benefits that we mentioned around sort of the industrial growth that we need in telecommunications is, creating this massive ecosystem that doesn't exist today. I think in a recent Delora report, I read that the RAN market is worth around $40 billion per year. Open RAN is currently sort of around 8% of that, but it's forecasted to grow to 18% by 2027. As these revenues grow, that ecosystem is going to grow and mature, which means more and more smaller companies, local companies, will really benefit from this growth, which this industry, in the RAN industry, has typically been monopolized, I think, by 3-4 major conglomerates. So I think there's a benefit there for all of the industry to flourish.
And how much is, at the moment, because we mentioned as well, there's a difference between, let's say, buying a fully disaggregated stack and really getting into sort of the understanding the plumbing of that. And how do you see that, is that critical, and how are you working with operators to really, let's say, understand that plumbing?
Yeah, and I think that's maybe one of the major challenges that I often get asked and I share. Obviously with disaggregation and a broader ecosystem of companies, that brings several combinations in every country that varies because of the different hardware providers and bands that exist. And some of those hardware units are still developing. The ecosystem is still needing to mature a little bit. But as it does, I think we really see the cost benefits around efficiencies improving through automation, but also the energy efficiencies improving. The reduction of equipment that is based at site, the reduction of electronics, pre-configured equipment that can be installed, centralized edge data centers, brings huge benefits to the operator. But yeah, it's I think navigating those combinations that are right for the operators in each one of those countries and how they wish to deploy, because with so many different companies involved, hardware, software, services companies, is there a prime lead, a prime organization that the operator needs? We've seen other examples where the operator wishes to do part of this management themselves, others where they want to outsource it all to one vendor to manage all of those underlying suppliers as well.
Yeah, and obviously, when there is disaggregation, the competitive landscape changes, right? There is more competition, which also in turn introduce more innovation opportunity, so which is good. But as you say, the value chain of SI, system integration, is changing as well, because we need an SI for the stack, an SI for the sites, an SI for, if we look at ORAN and MEC and the application, then it's an SI for the entire solution. For us, it's really important that as we go towards software and automation, we source some of the capability that enable us really to be more agile and to innovate faster and introduce some capability as we see fit, and as new emerging requirement from a deployment perspective or customer perspective comes up.
Yeah, so as we mentioned as well, sort of the understanding of where it is that you need to build the capabilities, particularly in-house. And as you mentioned, if you are having, opening up the ecosystem through the disaggregation for more of that innovation, then how do you work with said partners to sort of make sure everything's moving in that right direction where you want to move it to, right?
Yeah, developing the ecosystem, running partner program, it's really key. Working together, collaborate is going to be key. Really.
Yeah, and just another point as well. I think you mentioned earlier in the session around this idea of, holistic orchestration and being able to really automate across, multiple domains. What comes first, or how do you see that relationship between disaggregation and automation? Does one lock one another? Is one a prerequisite of the other, or?
I guess first it comes disaggregation, and virtualization will come first, and then automation of process, automation of management of provisioning, as well as automation of service delivery. Is going to be key to really automate all the service life cycle. Because only when we have automation, then the network can become programmable, and we can expose the IT as a services and the network as a services, to the outside world. But it needs to be virtualized capability to be able to be automated. That's my. Don't know if.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and we've talked a bit here today and recently as an industry around automation and AI and the benefits, and how traditional service providers need to evolve to become software-centric with more software developers. But as we think about how we're going to expand and build future networks and the role that AI and automation has to play in there for those efficiencies, commercial efficiencies, but also energy efficiencies as well. So as we look at the plan, build, operate, deploy model within the operator, I think it has a huge part to play. It comes with disaggregation, though. Yes.
Yeah,
it's a key enabler. Yeah.
Yeah, and as well, when we talk about automation, it's not just thinking about how do I automate a manual process, but it's intrinsically changing your approach to how you see automation as sort of a tool, or as a tool in your arsenal, really. I just want to open up to questions. I know I'm conscious of time, but any questions from the audience? If not, I also have a burning one as well that came. Okay, great. So now I want to switch back to something that was touched on in the previous presentation around another definition of disaggregation, i.e. sort of the separation of InfraCo and ServCo. What are your thoughts on this, I guess, form of disaggregation really on unlocking greater value? Is this about financial valuation, or to what extent is this also about unlocking innovation, if you will?
I think it's a bit of both, and this definition is when the disaggregation of remit becomes disaggregation of business focus as well, right? And you do that because you want to unlock new value, I would say, mostly. But to me, as we go towards becoming a telco company, I see actually more synergy between the infrastructure and the service layer. And infrastructure, I'm a head of infrastructure, and I can see that the infrastructure has a a key role in becoming a revenue enablement platform with distributed edge-centric architecture. We know that the enterprise are re-modernizing their applications are becoming fully distributed. Same for the AI workload, security workload, network workload. So having an infrastructure that is fully distributed is key. That is fully cloud native is also key with the deployment and NVI. More importantly, it's also essential that the infrastructure is fully interconnected, and it brings the interconnection strategy with third-party data centers to bring in the ecosystem that the enterprise need to transform is really important, as well as moving from tactical peering to strategic peering to be able to share the revenue. That, for example, for a few things. One, to be able to deliver application performance as enterprises are going towards a SaaS model, but the other one also to be able to have innovative business model with the OTT players. So yeah, I think I see lots of synergy between the services and the infrastructure layer.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think as we build networks of the future, we need to think more about the consumers, because consumers, I haven't met any that really care about 5G, 6G, Open RAN. What they care about is a fast, reliable service. They care about flexibility within their service. And we've got to think about how they're going to consume services in the future. And we need to be able to adapt faster to deliver those services, because as an industry, if we don't, the hyperscalers will. We already see the hyperscalers, moving towards MVNOs and this type of model, and they have typically a brand that is associated with flexibility, automation, and customer service. So we need to learn and adapt from that, and always think about the consumers.
Great. So maybe we'll close a little bit there because we need to wrap up a little bit early. But can everyone give a big hand to Nastasi and to Francesca, please? Thank you.